twee, eh? It's enough to make you believe in fairies, eh? Do you know, I can't believe that you arranged the whole team. Michael, repeat after me. I am a nasty, suspicious little boy.
I am a nasty, suspicious little boy.
With a nasty, suspicious little mind.
With a nasty, suspicious little mind.
I don't deserve to have such a kind, thoughtful, good-natured brother.
I don't deserve to have such a kind, thoughtful, good-natured brother.
And I intend to acknowledge this fact by buying him several enormously large drinks.
And I intend to acknowledge this fact by allowing him to buy me several enormously large drinks.
Ah, bosh!
Next on Tyne-Tees, news at 10 with Alistair Bennett and Trevor MacDonald. Starting shortly on Channel 4, comedy with The Golden Girls.
It takes time to prepare the ingredients for an irresistible chicken tikka.
What do you think of this one?
It takes time to put all the finishing touches to a mouth-watering lasagna. Time you'll be pleased to hear you don't have to spend.
Oh, thanks, love. I hope you've made yourselves useful today.
We've been helping Mum. Around the garden.
Menu Master. A taste of freedom.
There are brands that could wash up if you had a few friends round for lunch. While with Fairy, well, you could invite one or two more.
Oh, someone's birthday, is it?
No, Nick's coming, remember, with his flatmate.
Oh, yes, the vegetarian.
How very 60s.
Well, your brother seems to think he's okay.
Sounds like a real weed to me.
Well, I can't say I fancy a load of old lentils and beans either.
Actually, the correct name for them is pulses.
Oh, swallowed a dictionary, have we?
There we are.
Oh, hi, everyone. Sorry we're late. Mr. Troy, this is my lot. Mum, Dad.
Nice to see you.
Alison, Mr. Chase.
How's your pulse, Alison?
On each of these three, you find top quality whenever you shop at Morrison's. A large can of cattle meat, 33 pence. A litre of Morrison's pure orange, 55 pence. Moretti Vermouth, £1.99. There's all this and more at our superstore.
Morrison's to shop at Morrison's. For a rap stool in and you just have to choose. You can't help it, you just can't help it. Don't be a dummy, you know just what to do. You can't help it, you just
Roundtree tooth pastels. You just can't help.
Where is Dad? Who surveys the house? What about mortgage rates? Insurance? Local searches? Why isn't there more help when you do it the first time?
But there is. Lots of it, and discounts too. With our first-time buyers package. Make a beeline for N&P.
Because we've spent the time creating a tantalizing prawn curry, you will have the opportunity to do a bit of cleaning up. Menu Master, a taste of freedom.
The newspaper, delivered in time-honored tradition. But imagine a newspaper that's constantly updated. 15,000 times a day. Covers topics like, what's on the box? Up-to-the-minute news. Useful fashion tips. And the latest music charts. Altogether 1,600 pages of useful information. The ultimate newspaper, brought to you by Oracle.
This is Tyne-Tees, and it's time now for News at 10. Is Mr. Hurd a candidate? He sets out his terms. The Heseltine campaign banking on general tax cuts. Mr. Gorbachev at bay, he fails to impress his critics. The Lebanese militias start pulling out of Beirut. And it's going to be belts for backseat drivers now. Good evening. The Foreign Secretary, Mr. Douglas Hurd, indicated today he may stand for the Conservative Party leadership, if, that is, Mrs. Thatcher is beaten by Mr. Heseltine in the first ballot on Tuesday and then drops out. Mr. Hurd would not stand against her. Mr. Hurd said the Prime Minister and the Cabinet would want to consider how to draw the threads of their policy on Europe together. And her other proposer, the Chancellor, Mr. John Major, said tonight she may well be wrong about his European currency plans. The Prime Minister said she believed she would win against Mr. Heseltine and hoped she would win well. He's been holding out the prospect of lower income tax, lower poll tax, and higher public spending.
The challenge to the Prime Minister, who was in Northern Ireland today, is creating political ripples of all kinds. Today, her proposer in the leadership contest, Douglas Hurd, said he would not stand against her if there were to be a second ballot.
You can't get into a position where you say, I'm going to support somebody for the leadership this week, but not next. Or, you know, my support runs out on Tuesday. That's not the position. I believe that she's the right person to lead this country and to lead this party. And so I support Mrs. Thatcher, full stop.
So there was no way in which he'd run?
Against her.
Against her, which of course leaves open the possibility of running were Mrs. Thatcher to drop out before a second ballot. But Mr. Hurd, and indeed it seemed today almost half the Cabinet, say they're certain that Mrs. Thatcher will win on the first ballot. But if that happens, the Foreign Secretary hinted that some repair work is necessary.
This contest, as I say, this unnecessary contest, is over. Prime Minister, the rest of the Cabinet, all of us, will have to find the right ways of making abundantly clear that there is a united policy which we intend to follow through to success.
There was a similar dismissal of any second-round challenge to Mrs. Thatcher from the Chancellor.
We don't believe in the if and maybe scenario. We think the Prime Minister will win on the first ballot.
But on ITV's Channel 4 News, Mr. Major used the present political vacuum to repair the damage done to his ideas for a common currency, the hard ague, by the Prime Minister.
What the Prime Minister said was that she wondered whether people would actually use it, but she may well be wrong, and other people may well take a different view.
But it's an incredible thing to be having to go to Europe on the basis that the Prime Minister may be wrong.
Any Prime Minister may be wrong at any time, so may any Minister. It is even possible that our European colleagues are wrong and we are right.
Mr. Heseltine, enjoying plenty of media attention in Scotland today, set out in more detail his ideas on how the economy should be run. He's made changes to the poll tax, one of the issues of his campaign. He underlined that again today.
I believe that taxation, to be acceptable, has to be seen to be fair. And it has to be seen to be fair in the minds of those who pay it when they pay it.
And taking the Chancellor's recent forecast of 2% growth a year, which could produce extra revenue of some £20 billion over the lifetime of a parliament, Mr. Heseltine said that could provide not just for reform of the poll tax, but more.
Indeed, it would provide an opportunity for further reductions in income taxes if that was the priority. It would provide an opportunity for continuing improvements, as the Conservatives have done from the growth of the 1980s, in other public services. It is simply a question of raising the priority as to whether that would be the way the Cabinet concluded we should address the problem of how to deal with the public anxiety about the community charge.
Mr. Heseltine, as President of Scotland, produced a small demonstration by some of the younger members of his own party, anxious to support Mrs. Thatcher. And his recipe for the possibility of both increased public services and reduced income tax produced a sceptical response for one of Mrs. Thatcher's ministerial supporters.
The central point is that you can only spend the same amount of money once. You can't spend it on reducing the poll tax and on increasing other public spending and on reducing income tax. You can only take the white rabbit out of the hat once. You can't endlessly delve into the hat and bring out rabbit after rabbit.
Such argument between Tories, generated by the challenge to Mrs. Thatcher, meeting Ulster businessmen tonight, is already alarming plenty of her supporters in the Conservative Party. But so too is the possibility, however remote, of her not winning outright on the first ballot. Those with authority in the party know that a second ballot would produce even more division and the sight of Mrs. Thatcher trying to lead a split party. And there is already some talk of the possibility of her being advised to step down ahead of a second ballot rather than fighting on to the bitter end. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
Conservative backbenchers are mostly back in their constituencies now, trying to judge the mood of their supporters on the party leadership question. We've been with Gary Waller, MP for Keighley in Yorkshire. His majority last time was under 6,000.
Gary Waller, the MP for Keighley for 7 years, knows that the outcome of the leadership vote makes all the difference to his chances at the general election. He's one of a sizable number of MPs who've still to make up their minds, and he left London today for the constituency to take soundings on how he should vote. Keighley, with its textile mills and engineering works, has concerns about inflation. Unemployment and interest rates worry business people, and the £276 poll tax among terraced houses where rates were low is a source of some dissatisfaction. First stop for Mr. Waller was lunch with local businessmen, who bent his ear about their worries and the Conservative leadership.
I was well surprised it has happened, but whether we like it or not, we've got an election next Tuesday.
His soundings reveal a concern about timing and mixed feelings about the challenger.
I think many of the ideas are very good, and I think the party as a whole should be adopting some of the ideas and not fragmenting because of these, what are, on the face of it, ought to be good developments for the future of the country as a whole.
I would like things to stay as they are. I admit there are problems. I'm sure there are problems, but I would like things to stay as they are.
That's a view strongly endorsed by senior party members here.
I certainly would hope that our local member will be backing Mrs. Thatcher. I think what Mrs. Thatcher's done for the Conservative Party and the direction she's given, she deserves the party's all-out support.
But among local people, opinions are more volatile and open to a change of leader.
I admire her. She stuck to her guns. Things haven't worked out well, and I think there's got to be a change of leadership for them to get back in.
Michael's trying to lower the poll tax at the moment, so I probably would vote for him.
No, I like Margaret Thatcher.
So Mr. Waller's decision won't be easy, but in a constituency which mirrors the national view, both camps will watch with interest what choice he makes after the weekend's consultation. Jane Bennett-Powell, News at 10, Keighley.
The Chancellor, Mr. Major, said today he was confident inflation had peaked and would now start to come down. Last month's figure was 10.9%, the same as September's. Mr. Major has forecast 5.5% by the end of next year. The city is concerned about the Conservative leadership contest. It fears heavy selling of the pound if the uncertainty is not resolved quickly.
10.9% the city believes is the peak in the current inflation cycle. But there are some doubts about the Chancellor's forecast that inflation will tumble by half within a year. Previous Treasury predictions have been seriously wrong. In June 1989, inflation was 8.3%. Nigel Lawson, then Chancellor, said that was the peak. A year ago, John Major said it would fall below 6%. It went up to 10.9%. Now he forecasts the sharp fall to 5.5% at the end of 1991. What worries the city most about that prediction is that with the present leadership contest, they don't know who will be running policy in 1991 and what it'll be. Foreign investors are most concerned.
If there isn't a clear-cut result to the leadership struggle, then the European investors will become increasingly nervous. There will be increasing pressure on the pound.
If Mrs. Thatcher survives the challenge, the chances are the immediate reaction is going to be a positive one. If she loses, the immediate reaction may be a negative one.
I think the city would prefer to see Mrs. Thatcher remain in power because it's slightly worried about some of Mr. Heseltine's plans and the implications for public spending. However, I think what it really needs is a decisive result next Tuesday.
Until news comes through, the city will remain nervous. Dealing rooms will stay open late on Tuesday. Billions of pounds of currency and share deals will hang on the result. Hugh Pym, News at 10, the city.
The Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev has said that he'll replace military and government officials who oppose economic reform. And he's appealed for a new treaty of unity to hold his country together. But his main rival, Mr. Boris Yeltsin, was unimpressed. He said the Prime Minister and the Cabinet should be sacked. And he said they should be replaced by a coalition crisis committee to deal with the country's worsening economic problems.
Moscow's main motor accessories shop was shut today. Its forlorn customers victims of the Soviet power vacuum. The Kremlin wanted to put up the price of car parts, but Boris Yeltsin's Russian parliament said no. Confused staff simply locked the doors. Said the manager, "We just don't know who's in charge." Outside, black marketeers were doing a roaring trade, openly flaunting their disregard for what little authority remains here. Mr. Gorbachev urgently needs to restore confidence in his leadership. He'd been summoned to the Supreme Soviet to explain how he'll tackle the crisis, and readily admitted the scale of the challenge.
Открыто игнорируются законы, в обществе нагнетается напряженность, в ряде регионов страны политические силы с откровенно коричневым оттенком появились.
Mr. Gorbachev promised to act firmly. I accept responsibility, he declared to applause. But Mr. Yeltsin snapped, applauding, that's the old way of doing things. And there was disappointment here that Mr. Gorbachev produced no firm proposals. Criticism that a government reshuffle and changes at the top of an army he seems anxious to appease weren't enough. To many MPs, he looked like a leader without authority.
I'm not sure he does have power, no, I don't think so. He doesn't look like, he doesn't sound like he has any power at all.
Mr. Yeltsin called again for a coalition government with his Russian Republic, but it seemed clear today that'll be rejected. Mr. Gorbachev is facing the sternest test of his political career. Many Soviets fear that if he can't impose some order over a crumbling system, the army will. Tim Hewitt, News at 10, Moscow.
The military had to use force this morning to bus in their latest conscripts. This winter call-up more unpopular than ever as fears grow that the army will be ordered to turn on the people. These young men will tonight be transported to the far-flung corners of Mr. Gorbachev's troubled empire. We can't discredit them, he said today. We need them now to maintain stability. This public display of support, which follows a series of meetings between the president and the military, has strengthened the army's confidence.
Я бы не сказал, что президент наш в панике, но встреча с народными депутатами военными, она заставила, видимо, не только президента, но и весь президентский совет и наше правительство более серьезно уделять внимание нашей советской.
Mr. Gorbachev has also promised changes in the top echelons of the army command, seen by some here as proof that he fears their power and intends to curb it. But he gave no details today of how exactly he'd do it, and radicals remain suspicious of his intentions to take on the army and win.
It is constantly used as a power base of the party and not the people. And this is what makes it dangerous.
But tonight it appears that army officers have been reassured by Mr. Gorbachev's words. But the conscripts, drawn from ordinary Soviet citizens, may be less easily convinced, and their role could be crucial over the coming months. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Moscow.
In Lebanon, after years of civil war, there are small, clear signs that something is coming right to report next. Plus, why it's built up all round on the roads, and the BSP satellite companies are told you must pay the penalty. That's in a couple of minutes.
I liked it so much, I might buy the company.
I liked it. I liked it. See?
To reserve a prospectus in the 12 regional electricity company share offers, ring 0272-272-272.
Phew, what a blooming list. I'd better try boots for this lot. Just what I'm looking for. Mustn't forget the aftershave. Something for the ladies. Very professional. I wouldn't mind that myself. Now, let's see. They look tasty. The kids will love you. No, I think that's the blooming lot. Whoops, now I'm for it.
Oi, I've got something for you.
And I've got something for you too, my dear. For Boots. There's a Christmas present for everybody at Boots.
And if you've just joined us, the news is that you can now enjoy a day at the races courtesy of Hornby. Let's go down to the start, where they're under orders and they're off. Alan on the favourite is first away, and here comes Colin on the rails. Colin takes it up on the stand side, and so does Mary. And the chocolates took a nasty tumble there. So as they race for home, it's Alan all the way, but oh dear, he's being interfered with. There could be a steward's inquiry here. So at the line, Colin wins by a stroke of luck, and Alan's lost his shirt. New horse racing from Hornby. Even Willie Carson approves.
Hey, don't I know you from somewhere?
That's original.
Emerson High, 1975. You're in my class.
I was your teacher.
What helps keep skin looking young? Oil of Ulay twice a day. It works like skin's natural fluids to replace lost moisture.
Miss Fitzhenry?
Bugsy Brown.
Oil of Ulay twice a day.
Wow.
The secret of young-looking skin.
Greasy grime, germs, dirt. When the cleaning gets tough, does your liquid cleaner let you down? Reach for Flash. An ordinary liquid can't compete with Flash because used neat, Flash dissolves greasy grime in half the time and fights germs. Cleans floors, cleans worktops. So when the cleaning task gets tough, Flash cuts through greasy grime in half the time.
In Lebanon, a country torn apart by long years of civil war, peace now seems a real possibility. Since the defeat of the rebel Christian general Michel Aoun last month, thousands of militiamen have laid down their arms. The government is gradually gaining control. It's now deploying more than 5,000 of its own troops in the capital, Beirut. Fighting has been going on in Lebanon for 15 years. During that time, more than 150,000 people have died. The center of the conflict has been Beirut, a city split by the so-called Green Line, with Christian Lebanese forces in the east and the Syrians in the west, supporting the Muslim Amal militia group. It's the Muslim Hezbollah group, though, supported by Iran, who are thought to be holding Western hostages.
Beirut's 9 miles of Green Line is like a jagged wound that's divided the city for a decade and a half. It has almost gone, and families, both Christian and Muslim, have moved back to their homes amid the filth and rubble. They're joining Beirut's latest major attempts to shift from war to peace. Such processes litter the country's shattered path when hope turned to failure. It may be no different this time. But with the dismantling of these Green Line barricades, Beirut is undergoing a form of radical surgery. It is being enforced by the guns and troops of Syria, the now dominant force in and around Beirut, and the guarantors of central government policy against the militias.
The results, superficially at least, are quite startling. Crisscrossing the city from Christian east to Muslim west here is now easier than it has been for many years.
The tattered quality of life remains unchanged, and no peace plan has so far ever worked. Lebanon's warlords have agreed to withdraw their private armies from a circle around Beirut only, 30 miles in diameter. But they have not so far laid down their weapons. As things stand, the militias are exchanging places with units of the United Lebanese Army. It all looks a serious attempt to rid the capital of gun law and anarchy. Christian militiamen in East Beirut have cleared minefields to allow greater access through and into their areas. The government rebuffs all the skeptics.
The public is all for it, and because I don't think any force in the country has the ability to stand up against it.
The remedy, if that's what it proves to be, has already made a mark. Beirut League football here being played in an old artillery pit, a visible sign of some stability and peace. Peace that has been denied to Beirut for the entire lives of all these children. They are all orphans, byproducts of the wars. Over 2,000 are packed into this one institution. Their eyes have seen some indescribable horrors. Beirut fosters acts of gross inhumanity. This baby girl was stabbed and thrown onto a rubbish tip a few days after birth. She was found bleeding to death among the garbage, chewed and scratched by starving vermin and cats.
I'm a professional of this work, but when I see Farah, I'm very sad and I'm crying.
Now, 3 months after she was saved, Farah's wounds have almost healed. All the children are well cared for. They look content. The birth of a new secure Beirut might bring them peace for the very first time. Several thousand more Lebanese government troops are expected to spread across the city, including Hezbollah's stronghold in Beirut's southern suburbs. It is from the recent upheavals on the Beirut landscape that the western hostages have almost certainly been removed, probably to the Bekaa Valley. Talking to ITM from his Shiite stronghold, Hezbollah's spiritual leader, Sheikh Mohammed Hussein Fadlallah, was optimistic about a hostage release soon. He said the hostages were tied up to complex issues that a new political atmosphere would induce into solving, though the timescale of any release from the fundamentalist grip is as undefined as ever. The fact that Hezbollah, under Syrian persuasion, seems to be going along with the security changes is being seen as one sign that the new peace plan may have a better chance of succeeding than the many failures of the past. Brent Sadler, News at 10, Beirut.
Here, wearing seatbelts is to be compulsory for all rear seat car passengers, adults as well as children, from next July. The government believes it could save 100 lives a year.
West London tonight, and the Metropolitan Traffic Police remind drivers that front seat belts are the law for adults, while it's compulsory for children to wear rear seat belts when the car is fitted with them. And more than half the cars on the road have rear belts. Yet police say parents thoughtlessly put their children's lives at risk.
The worst case is when the child actually stands up between at the rear of the two passenger seats and just comes straight through between mum and dad and heads towards the windscreen.
The patrol stopped one woman with 2 children unrestrained in the back.
I usually always have my children in seatbelts, actually.
So what was the problem today?
The problem was that it was caught in the actual catch on the back flap.
At present, adults have a choice about wearing a rear belt. Only 1 in 10 does. An unrestrained adult in a 30-mile head-on crash is thrown forward with a force of 3.5 tons, often crashing into front seat passengers. Children illegally without belts are totally vulnerable. Last year, 389 people travelling in the backs of cars were killed. 3/4 of them weren't wearing seat belts. 4,286 people were badly hurt. Nearly 2,800 weren't belted in. The government believe rear seat belts will save 100 lives and prevent 1,000 serious injuries each year.
This is, I think, the most important single road safety measure which we can take to further reduce the awful toll on our roads 5,000 people killed every year. We wish to reduce that, and this is going to produce a significant reduction in road deaths and casualties.
The new rules don't need to be voted on in the House of Commons. They're already covered by existing legislation. But the government hope people won't wait for a change in the law before belting up in the back seat. Sarah Cullen, News at 10, Central London.
Police in the West Midlands have launched a new campaign to shock teenagers into becoming better drivers. They believe that dangerous driving by young people is causing an increasing number of road accidents. A baby boy died in Newcastle yesterday after his pushchair was crushed by a car driven by joyriders. Our Midlands correspondent Terry Lloyd reports.
The tragedy occurred when young joyriders crashed a stolen car into the pushchair in which baby Richard Mitchell was being wheeled home by his mother. As a result of the growing number of accidents involving youngsters, West Midlands Police are now inviting school children to take part in a course designed to teach them to respect cars and the road.
Here we have the car committing the offence of doing a right turn. Here comes a motorbike straight into another car and over the bonnet. This is how fatal accidents happen.
The 16-year-olds have just been shown a horrifying police videotape. With that fresh in their minds, the youngsters, all too young to drive legally, are encouraged to get behind the wheel for expert tuition on private ground. Last year, nearly 90,000 accidents involved drivers in the 17 to 25-year bracket. Many were caused by inexperience, joyriding and reckless driving. This was one such incident, a police chase recorded by camera.
By showing them videos of actual accidents that we have on film, he's quite a shock to the system to them, and I think it may well bring it home that it may be exciting getting behind the wheel for the first time. It is also a very dangerous thing.
In the West Midlands, well over 2,000 road accidents in the last 10 months involved youngsters. It's hoped the new scheme will make them safer and more responsible. Terry Lloyd, News at 10, Birmingham.
The Independent Broadcasting Authority is to terminate BSB's contract for 5 satellite channels and is to invite other offers for those wavelengths. People with BSB squarials won't lose their pictures immediately. There's to be a transitional period. The IBA said BSB's merger with Sky Television was a serious breach of its programme contract.
Today's statement by the IBA amounts to a rap over the knuckles for British satellite broadcasting for agreeing to a merger without IBA consent. It also clears the way for another broadcaster to apply for BSB's satellite frequencies, which the merged company planned to phase out. But some experts doubt if there will be any takers.
I don't think another company is likely to try and do the same thing, broadcasting the small dishes on people's roofs. There may be people who want to start channels, but broadcasting just to cable and using cable to redistribute it. Really, before any serious proposals get off the ground, people need to know if the satellite's available.
The IBA says the 200,000 viewers who've bought BSB squarials should now be given a chance to decide whether or not to switch to Sky dishes. So the new company will be allowed a transition period when it can transmit on both satellites. The man who helped launch Sky says the decision means satellite TV now has a more secure future.
All the new satellite developments that can be counted on to take place will take place on one satellite system. And so one piece of technology, one dish, guarantees you the future in satellite TV. The equivalent argument with VCRs of VHS versus Betamax, which held up the development of VCRs in the early days, that's gone now. The technological argument, the consumer confusion is over.
But tonight, opposition MPs said the whole affair showed the need for satellite companies to be regulated by the same rules as other broadcasters.
Tonight's main story again. The Foreign Secretary, Mr. Hurd, has indicated that he may stand for the Conservative Party leadership, but only, he hinted, if Mrs. Thatcher is beaten in the first ballot, he drops out.
Finally, the bookmakers noted Mr. Hurd's hint tonight and adjusted their odds accordingly. The undeclared candidate is now second favourite in Tuesday's leadership stakes. Ladbrokes make Mrs. Thatcher the clear favourite at odds of 7-2 on. Mr. Hurd is quoted at 7-2 against, and Mr. Heseltine is third at 5-1. On the outsiders list, William Hill give odds of 50-1 against Mr. Norman Tebbit, and a former winner over course and distance, Mr. Heath, is now at 200-1. And another outsider, the filly, Mrs. Edwina Curry, 500-1. And those are the odds, and that's the news at 10 tonight. Good night.
Can Mrs. Thatcher survive Michael Heseltine's leadership challenge? Does she deserve to? Brian Walden will be interviewing Cecil Parkinson, one of the Prime Minister's closest allies, on Sunday at 1:10 on ITV.
Next, following the national weather, the regional news in Northern Life with Maria Coll.
As winter draws closer, now is the time to look into Farnham's and choose from a range of heat-saving ready-made curtains with savings of up to half price. Farnham's, Nunn Street and Newgate Street, Newcastle.
I want to be like Mummy. I want to be a princess.
I want to be blonde. I want to be out late. I want to be brown. I want to be green. I want to be next. I want to be discovered. I want to be in for Christmas. I want to be a 12. I want to be wrong. I want to be Colonel Mustard. I want to be indoors. I want to be secure.
Whatever you want to be in life, you want to be with Prudential.
There's never been a more rewarding time to visit your Ford dealer. Until December 31st, Ford dealers are taking hundreds of pounds off every Ford that's in the Lucky Numbers promotion. It's all part of a £17 million giveaway. And there's finance on Fiestas, Sierras, and previous model Escorts and Orions. See the local press for details.
Yeah, right, see you there.
Yorkshire team. Imagine the greatest Ashes team of all time.
Bradman boycott.
England and Australia combined.
Jeff boycott.
Who would be in?
Lily. What about boycott?
And who would be out?
I wouldn't miss this game for anything. Play Test Selector with your own personal game card.
And win up to £2,000 a week. Every week, just match the names on your game card to the expert selections.
Only in the Sunday Times. Right?
Watch out, it's Mitsubishi time at Ramblow's. So many TVs and videos, some on interest-free credit. I can't possibly watch them all, so I won't. Or maybe I will.
Now, let's see how good your powder really is. Look what the best traditional powder can do. Here's a powder that cleans visibly better. Ariel Ultra.
Good evening. Things can only improve during the weekend, and they probably will, I think, but probably not until Sunday for those in the south. Today's mild, wet and windy weather is going to take some shifting, I think, but by Sunday we'll all be enjoying a change to something cooler, brighter, just slightly sourer, but certainly some sunshine on the way.